Hello everyone, welcome back to Paper Made Me Do It. I'm back in my B6 Archer and Olive dot grid notebook to do some swatches for y'all in this video, as well as some doodles with the recently released Acrylograph paint pens or paint markers. They are like an acrylic paint type pen or marker, and I'll be showing two sizes, both available sizes of the nibs in this video. You can see in the packaging you get a smooth blending palette on the left side. You get some instructions printed on the right, and then the markers themselves come inset in this foam insert in the center of the packaging. You get a solid white paint pen, 8 colored paint pens, a blending pen, as well as a couple extra nibs. Now, the colors are obviously going to depend on which palette you select. There are currently 3 available choices. There is a jewel, a tropical, and a primary. So this is what the jewel colors look like. And you can see here, this is when I was just getting started before my first use. I tried to hold them securely and shake them all together for some time saving, but the shaking is real, folks. I will talk more about that later in the video though, when I give you my overall impressions. So here I'm just going in with the swatches of each set. On the left side, I'm starting out with the 3mm, which is the larger of the 2 sets. And I've heard some people question or make comments about these markers in comparison with the Posca paint pens that are already on the market. If you are familiar with that product, I think the 3mm set is very similar to the fine point in the Posca paint pens, just to give you an idea of the size. And then the 0.7mm set is more similar to the extra fine, or I believe it's called super fine in the Posca collections. So here with the 0.7 white, I'm just doodling a little heart so you can see that that white is opaque on top of the dried colors, whether they're light or dark. And then here I'm going in with some little swatches with that 0.7 or the finer of the 2 sets. Obviously, both sizes coordinate perfectly in each color palette, so they are the identical same set of colors regardless of the size nib that you choose. So this is a close-up of the actual nibs to give you a little better idea. That's a 3mm on the left and then the 0.7 on the right. Now the 3mm, even though it is the larger of the 2, it is still not a huge nib. It's large enough that you can lay down some larger color areas, especially for backgrounds, but it is still small enough that it can be used for outlines, borders, even lettering, especially for headers or title pages, things like that. So here, after the swatches, I just decided to do a quick little doodle here of some flowers. I've not done a lot of floral illustrations in the past, so this is fairly new to me, but it is something that I enjoy looking at and hope to practice in the future. You can see here that after each layer is dry, you can go on top of it with light to dark or dark to light. You can layer the 3mm over the 0.7 or vice versa. This is what the pens look like side by side, so regardless of your nib size, the body itself is the same exact size. And next I went in to do a little more doodling The top two images on the left side of the page were basically my attempt to directly duplicate some samples that Archer and Olive had put out early in their marketing of this product. I then just did a couple other quick similar designs, and that little floral vine was done, I believe, exclusively with the 0.7 millimeter size pens. Just a few more little doodles here, just playing around. Tried some abstract shapes, and then briefly tried the blending capability. There are a couple different ways that you can blend these pens. So this was some of my blending practice and writing. So now I will get into my first impressions. I'm just calling this first impressions instead of a review because I just recently received these and haven't used them long enough for me to do a thorough review quite yet. So for my first impressions, I wasn't sure if I should share the good news or the bad news first. So I was reminded of this clean joke that I used to always tell my patients when I worked in an inpatient rehab hospital. So, of course, here's the joke. Once upon a time, there was a carrot who was crossing the street. And as the carrot was walking across the road, he was hit by an 18-wheeler. He woke up in the hospital, and the doctor was leaning over him in the hospital bed. As he looked up, the doctor said, "I've got some good news and some bad news. Which would you like first?" And the carrot said, "Well, I'll take the good news." So the doctor says, "Well, the good news is you are going to make it." The carrot's like, "Whew, good." He says, "Well, what's the bad news?" And the doc says, "Well, the bad news is you're going to be a vegetable for the rest of your life." Waka, waka, waka. So I wasn't sure that going with the good news first worked out very well for the carrot, so I decided to start with the cons and then wrap it up with the pros. We'll end it on a good note. Now, the cons, they're really not cons. They're really not bad news. This is just my opinion, based on my experience. So I don't want to sound too negative here, but at the same time, I just do want you to be prepared that there will be an intense amount of shaking and nib pressing, but mostly shaking required before the first use to get the paint flowing, okay? So after getting 2 sets going, my arm was exhausted. But, I tend to be impatient. I wanted to get every single pen going right then. So, it required a little work. Now, that being said, once you get the paint flowing, the amount of shaking that's required before each future use is very minimal and reasonable, maybe just a few seconds. So it's not a big deal to me at all now. It's just that first use out of the box is what's going to require a lot of shaking, a lot of work. So you may want to skip your workout on day 1, but after that, the shaking is not that big of a deal. Just a few seconds and you're good to go. Now, the second con for me, I think will improve over time, but with my first use, I noticed that the pens, especially like the 3 millimeter size, would start to run dry when I was laying down a larger area of color for a background. So if that happens and you pull away to shake the pen some more and press the nib to get the paint flowing better again, don't go directly back to the area that you left. If it isn't completely dry, the nib will start to pull up some of that original paint layer that you had already put down, and you'll end up with this rough kind of textured area that doesn't look nice. So if you just wait for that first layer to completely dry, then you can go back over it to finish up the background, and you'll get a much smoother, better result. And I said that I think this may improve over time because so far I've used these pens in 3 separate sittings, and the paint flow seems to get a little better with each use. So moving on now to the good news, or the pros. The most obvious pro to me is the curated color palette selection. The primary set, it's going to be your standard primary colors by definition, but the jewel set and the tropical set have some unique colors, I believe. They're very pretty colors, but they're unique colors, and they work really well together, and you're getting this nice kind of complete palette in only 8 colors. So to get such a coordinated palette in other brands, I think you would have to buy very large sets. Like, there are some sets that are even up to like 35, 50 markers. Or you'd have to try to curate them yourself by purchasing individual colors. So the color palette choices for me was a big pro. The second pro for me was the layering. So straight out of the box, I think the Posca paint pens are just a little more user friendly, but I think that's because of the formula of the paint. The Acrylograph paint seems to be just a hair thicker, which also makes it more opaque. So another pro is the ability to layer these colors over each other multiple times if you want to. As long as you let each previous layer dry completely, you can layer dark over light or light over dark and get some really beautiful and dramatic results. A little kind of honorable mention here would be the blending capabilities of these pens. I can't really speak much to that because the few handwriting samples you saw in that swatch section is the only blending I've tried so far. But I know that there is the capability to blend these pens in 2 different ways, and you can get some really pretty results by doing that. So that is another pro, I think, of this line. Now, once these are dry, you can also write over them with almost any other medium because they dry with a matte finish. So gel pens and archival fine liners both worked well for me. I was asked in an Instagram post about Tombos, and they worked fine as well. They're just not going to look as opaque as the 0.7 acrylographs because of the nature of the Tombow ink. So the main thing that I did not want to do in this video is to strongly persuade, anyone in one direction or the other in terms of, should you buy these for yourself. Instead, I just wanted to highlight the pros and cons in my experience, because I feel like there are going to be pros and cons with any product on the market. So my overall first impression is that I do not regret buying these. There was a little more of a learning curve than I expected with my first use, but if you're willing to work through that potential learning curve in using them, you may end up being very happy with the results that you get. And I will say that in 3 separate sittings so far, I feel like I'm enjoying using them a little more each time. You just get a little more familiar with them, kind of figure them out. The paint starts to flow even better. So they're getting better with each use for me. Now, if you'd like to see more samples of some of the artwork and results that you can get using these pens, check out the Archer and Olive account on Instagram. And there's also a hashtag on Instagram, which is #Acrylograph. As always, thank y'all so much for watching. That is it for this video. So I will see y'all soon. Bye, y'all.